Hello and welcome back. In the last couple of lessons, we learned how a form works and we learned all about input fields and the seemingly 2,000 different options that an input field has. In this one, we're going to learn about a text area, which is very similar to a regular input field where you can basically type regular text. But the difference is a text area, you can write a lot of text with new lines and you can expand how wide you want the text area to be and you can resize it and things like that. So this video is going to be a lot shorter and we're just going to learn about text areas. So let's dive into that right now. All right, so I just have VS Code open. This is from our last lesson. And what I'm going to do is, you know what? I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to resave this again. And instead of form fields, let's just call this textarea.html. Input field, now let's call it text area. And let's get rid of all of this stuff in here. And let's get rid of the action because we want it to submit on itself. Head on over to our favorite browser, whatever one you want to use. Open up textarea.html and there's nothing in there. Good. We told it to basically have nothing in there. So a text area is not quite the same as an input field. It doesn't look like this. It doesn't have a self-closing tag. A text area is different. Wow, it filled out a lot for me. So let's actually get rid of a bunch of this stuff. And you can see that it supports name, IDs, columns, and rows. Let's just get rid of that for now. Let's get rid of that. And let's simply display this on the page. So we've got a text area here and we could put multiple lines. Wow, that is tiny. Multiple lines in here. And that's okay. It also comes with a nice little resize tool where you can make your text area bigger or smaller. So whenever you're writing in a text field, next time on a website, and you're like, I wish I had more space, always look for this little icon down here. Sometimes it's disabled, but a lot of times it's not, and you can just resize it. So your text area has an opening and closing tag, and if we wanted to have some sort of default value in here, we don't put value. So value is equal to test. This is what we would do with an input field. We actually need to give that a hard refresh and there's nothing in there. Whereas with an input field, it would have that in there already. Because it has an opening and closing tag, chances are we put text right in the middle. So let's go ahead and put some default text in here. And now we have some default text in here. So we have something to work with at this point. We can actually select all of this and modify it as needed. So it's not the same as a placeholder. Speaking of placeholder, let's add one. We have a placeholder in here, and this is, remember that ghost text that shows up in the background? I'm going to refresh this page. And yep, default text is in here. That's good, but what happens when I delete all of it? So let's go ahead and delete the text. Ghost text. There it is. And it only shows up when there's nothing in here. It's not too often in HTML that we see something that is actually space sensitive. We looked at the pre-tag once upon a time, and that one was space sensitive. But basically nothing else is. Except text area. Look at this. It looks like it's sort of centered only because I'm making this bigger. Now it looks centered. But by default, it's something like this. Doesn't really look very nice. And that's because we have all this extra white space in here. We have all this extra white space in here. So this is one of those elements where if you have a default value, you are going to want to definitely remove the extra white space. Or if it's on purpose, you could put something like this. You have line 1 here, and then get rid of all that extra text. So my editor automatically wanted me to type in here. Don't do that. Delete all that white space, delete all that white space, and then go line 3. And then you want it to end right afterwards. So we have line 1 and line 3. No extra white space in here, no extra spaces at all. So it's hugging that left section. That is the right way to do it. And we have some other attributes that we can look at as well. So let's look at the number of cols or columns. Let's make this 100 columns wide. So columns go up and down just like in a spreadsheet. And that got really big. So let's go ahead and, yeah, that got really big. So I had to zoom out to 150% there to see 100 columns. And that's basically, if I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 as 10, and I copy this 10 times, so 2, 3, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, it is exactly 100 characters wide using default text, default font family. We can also do the same thing with rows. So let's give rows its own attribute. And you know what? Let's separate this onto a new line because HTML does not care about white space to the exception of inside a pre or a text area. So it doesn't care except for in here. Let's put rows is equal to, let's give it 50 rows. So by default, it has like 2 or 3, depends on the browser. Let's go ahead and give this a refresh. Now look at this. We have all sorts of room to type. We have all sorts of stuff in here. Let's also say when this form is submitted, it is required, meaning it cannot be empty. And so let's go ahead and give this an example as well. So in here, let's create an input field. We learned about this one last video. The type is equal to submit, and we are going to give it a value of submit. And actually, let's make those rows a little less because that is obnoxiously large. Nah, it's still, let's do 20. That's better. So now we have an input field. The type is submit. The value is going to be submit. That's the text that's in here. And when I submit this, it will submit fine. Let's go ahead and delete all that text and say that this field is required. This text area is required. So if there's nothing in there and we try to submit, oh, please fill out this field. All right. And if we fill something in there, then it submits. Because this is in a form, we need to give this a name. So the name is going to be, let's just call it text area. It can also have an ID if we wanted to. So let's go ahead and give this a label. And we can do a lot of the same stuff we did in the last video in this video. So when we're dealing with labels, we can do a label is for, and then give it an ID, which is going to match here. So let's call this T1. It's a terrible ID name, but it's unique. There's only 2 instances where you see T1 in this file, in the for attribute and the ID attribute. So you know they match up. Class is equal to, we could give it a bunch of CSS classes if we wanted to. And now let's look at one more. We didn't look at this one in the last video because it was that last video was, honestly, it was borderline overwhelming. So this one, we're going to look at some more attributes. So we have disabled, and in regular HTML, you would just write disabled. In XHTML, you write disabled is equal to disabled to be extra verbose. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. And now you can see that my text is in there, my default text, line 1 and 3. But I can't actually click in there. It doesn't work. It's disabled. In fact, we can do the same thing with this button. We can just type disabled, disabled, and we can't submit the form at all. So that's pretty neat. Let's go ahead and actually get rid of that one because we want this to be submittable. And now let's look at a min length, So we're going to say this has to be a minimum of 5 characters, but this actually can also have a max length of 10 characters. Now that's pretty rude to say that someone has to put in between 5 and 10 characters for a text field or a text area rather. That doesn't really make sense. Usually you would have something like a minimum length of 20 for some sort of, I don't know, user profile biography and a max length of like 1,000. But because I don't want to write 1,000 characters, we're going to do 5 and 10. So I refresh. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. And let's do 1, 2, 3, 4. Submit. Oh. Please use at least 5 characters. You are currently using 4 characters. Let's do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh, wait, actually I'm typing and it doesn't let me go any further. Oh, that's pretty neat. Max length of 10. And so now I can submit this and we can see the text area says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 10 characters because that's what we said the maximum was. And lastly, this is a very important one. Autofocus. This one is good for the user experience. So autofocus is going to say, as soon as the page loads, automatically allow someone to start typing in here. So when it comes to autofocus, you only ever want one form field, whether it's an input or a text area or a select or anything, you only want to use autofocus once. Because you can't focus on multiple sections or multiple fields or multiple input fields. You can only focus on one at a time. You can only type in one place at a time. Only give it to one particular element. So because we only have the one text area, we can refresh this page and I automatically can start typing. And again, let's just go ahead and delete that from the URL. So we give this basically a hard refresh. And you can see that my cursor right in there it's ready to start typing. So that is Textarea and a lot of different attributes. Now, these are not all Textarea related. You can have placeholder basically anywhere where you can write text. Columns and rows, this is Textarea only. Required is for basically any form field. Name is a global attribute. ID is global, class is global. Min length and max length, these are Textarea related, and autofocus can be just like placeholder. You can use autofocus anywhere where you can start typing. So your task for this video is going to be create a form. Method is equal to get, action is equal to blank. That means it's going to submit onto itself. Create a label. Make that for attribute match the ID attribute of the text area that you're going to make. Then with your text area, I want you to add a placeholder, columns, rows, required, name, ID, class, even though it's empty, add it anyways, it's good practice. Max length, min length, and autofocus. And then I want you to tinker around with the different spacing in a text area and just sort of get a feel for how that one works. Lastly, create an input, type is equal to submit. That's going to submit your form for you. Save your file, open it up in your browser, and click submit. Then let's head on over to that next lesson and let's learn about buttons. There's a different type of element that we can use called button instead of using an input field. It's the one I prefer, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.